Computer. There we go. Welcome, everyone. This is Sustainable Health. I was going to say Auntie Sue's Pandemic Kitchen, which used to be its former name, but Sustainable Health Live Chat. And we're here tonight, especially with Gil and Lucy Coriel, who are going to talk to us about maple syrup and sap running, because even though we've got several feet of snow outside, and even though there are other people who have snow, not Noelle, she's got 80-degree weather in Tucson, Arizona, but a lot of us are still thinking it's winter, but the plants know better, and they know that it is actually spring is starting, and we're going to see that. You're going to see your onions and potatoes start to sprout if you've got them in the cupboard, and it's a great time of year to do sprouting. And so this is the very, very beginning, like the crescent moon, when we have a new moon, new moon, and then we get that crescent moon. So this is like the crescent of spring, just emerging. And there's lots of holidays. Groundhog Day is the one that people probably are most familiar with. But we've got lots of things going on in the spring, and we're just beginning to see it. So I am going to take myself off the spotlight so that Gil and Lucy can talk to us about what it's like to make your own maple syrup. So first of all, how do you know when to start making it? When do you know when it's time? Wait a second, I got to get you off mute. You have to unmute now. I had everybody on mute. You guys know how to unmute? Lower right-hand corner. There's a little button. There you go.
I had like 3 screens going, so I had to find my pointer.
Oh, okay. All right. So tell us, how do you know when it's time to start running sap, or what do you call it? Do you call it running sap?
Yeah, when the sap is running, and it's generally late winter
and almost mid to late February or early March.
Yeah,
okay.
But it depends on the weather. You have to have cold nights and warm days, and once you have days that are up in the 30s, the trees can warm up, and the sap will start running. And other than that, I really didn't know much about how it functioned, but over the last couple of days, I did some research so I could know why the sap runs, and it's actually kind of interesting.
Okay.
In the fall, the trees kind of go dormant, and they begin to store excess starches in their sapwood. So they kind of convert to starches and store it.
It's liquid sunshine.
Yes, exactly. But once you get through the winter and things start warming up, like generally it has to be up above freezing, so in the 30s, but essentially the wood has to be able to heat up to 40 degrees, according to the University of Maine's cooperative extension. But
okay.
Which with solar gain, I guess they can do that in the 30s. And at 40 degrees, the starches convert to sugars and enter the sap.
Wow.
Which is really interesting. And at that point, you can tap the tree, and the sap actually runs. The sap runs when the tree heats up, because there's then a greater pressure inside the tree than outside. So the sap running is a function of heat producing pressure, which is kind of interesting. But it's kind of like those late winter days when you go out and it maybe still in the 30s, but you feel like it's t-shirt weather again, even though it's really not t-shirt weather. But you've been used to much colder temperatures. So that's kind of what I look for. And I also check with friends that are also tapping trees and see if they've thought that it was a good idea to start and if their sap is running. And so I kind of just go with the flow and try to figure out when it ought to be a good time.
That's cool.
Yourself, Susan.
So, anyhow, I hope you can't hear my dogs barking in the background. I've got my little headset on, but I can hear them. So I'm gonna just ask one more question before I mute myself. And that is, so tell us, what's the process when you do determine that it's.
Okay. Yeah, Lucy can tell you what we do.
So, well, I'll show you. This is what we use for putting in the tree. First, we find a maple tree because that's what you get the sap out of for maple syrup. And then you take one of these. This is the part that
This is the tap.
This is the tap, and this part goes into the tree. It's kind of like a small tube, and it goes into this longer tube, and then
Should I get the pictures out? You want me to screen share the
Yeah, we can
pictures?
do that.
Yeah,
we put it-
while you're telling us, I'm gonna do that.
the tube can go in go
This one doesn't.
go in a bottle.
She's showing us, so.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna not do the screen share, so you can show us that. Yeah. Okay.
And it goes in the bottle so that when the sap comes down through the tube, it goes into this bottle, and we collect that sap.
Yeah. So we have to drill the trees, or we have to tap the trees. So we use a cordless drill with a nice sharp drill bit so that the insides of the hole will be nice and clean and not raggedy.
And then we can hammer this into the tree.
Yeah.
Where the hole is.
And kind of the rule is, for a single tap, you need a tree of at least 10 inches in diameter.
Wow, how old would that tree be then, probably?
That is a good question, but I'm gonna say at least 40 or 50 years old.
Wow.
I think, at a guess. And I'm guessing that because there's one maple tree that we have close to the house here that is actually a sugar maple. It's maybe, like 50 feet from the house. And I remember when that tree was very small, was a younger tree. So that's my guess. And that one is about that size now.
How do you know which ones are the maple trees?
Well,
Oh, that is a good question.
you can kind of look at the bark of the tree
Yep,
and the
bark.
leaves too.
Mhm.
The maple leaves are actually easy to spot sometimes because they have. Do you have any pictures?
Well, so there
They
are
have
various,
they're shaped like a hand, kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
yes.
The
And
Canadian
so-
flag has one, right?
Yes, and so that, I think the Canadian flag, the leaf on a Canadian flag, I think is probably something like a red maple.
but it isn't the kind of maple that you would use to get maple syrup. Usually you would use a sugar maple.
Yes, if you have sugar maples, but if not, then you use red maples. But so in looking at the leaf, I think most people know what I don't have a picture to pull up. I wish I should have thought of that. But
Yeah, me
most people
too.
kind of know that shape. And in between the lobes of the leaf, like on the Canadian flag, that leaf comes to a point in between, comes to a sharp point, and sugar maples are rounded where the lobes.
Oh,
So that's one way to tell. And then the other way to tell a sugar maple is that once they're once they're of a certain age, their bark starts to kind of become more rough, and kind of like if this is the trunk of the tree, then you get like these kind of almost breaking away little flakes, rather than a smooth bark.
Right here.
Mhm.
I when I took biology at Kent's Hill School in Maine, we were supposed to identify trees, and we were supposed to go into the woods around the school and identify trees, but unfortunately all the leaves had fell on off the tree by the time we did that. So our teacher showed us how to recognize bark, and he also said, look at the bottom of the tree, and if you see a lot of leaves that look the same, then you can probably guess that it's the right one. And he told us that red maples had like 3 big lobes, R-E-D, and sugar maples have more like 5 lobes, S-U-G-A-R. I don't know if that's true. I like the idea about them being rounded rather than pointed.
Yeah, the sugar maples that we have, it still looks like 3 lobes, but they are broken up more.
They
I think.
have
So I guess you could call that more lobes.
Okay. Well, I'll have to go Google sugar maple leaves when we get
Yeah.
off.
If I was really prepared, I would have had some leaves.
As soon as I asked the question, I thought, oh, I could have put a picture in there. But I'm going to open up and show the pictures so you guys can tell us what you're doing in the pictures, okay?
Okay.
All right. Let's see. And I'm going to go back to the beginning picture here. Okay, there we go. So what's happening in this picture?
Do you want to describe what we're doing there?
I'm pulling the sled that we have, which is full of the containers and bottles that we use to collect the sap. And we're heading to go tap the trees, I'm pretty sure, or check on them.
Yes. So in this picture, we are pulling our sled with our empty containers, and we're heading out to our trees to check our containers that are currently collecting sap. And our process is pretty rudimentary in that we just save empty bottles and clean them out, and then we use those and we kind of tuck them in the snow at the base of the tree.
And
And-
use and we use these to get the sap from the tree.
Yeah,
The
we
bottle.
just tuck the hose in the container and
With a bottle cap on the top so no snow or other debris gets in the bottle with the sap in it.
yeah. And you can tell on the warmer days, you can tell that the sap is running much more because you have to check your bottles more often before they overflow and you lose your sap on the ground. But essentially, once the tree's tapped and we're collecting the sap, we try to get at least 40 gallons of sap.
That's a
Is
lot.
that,
It is a lot. Yeah,
but it boils down to make a good amount of syrup.
it makes depending on your sugar content, it should make about a gallon of syrup. And I haven't collected more than that, because the boiling process is fairly time intensive. So there we are boiling. And so my setup is, at least this particular year, was a 2-burner outside stove that ran on propane. And then I've got this really big old roasting pan. So the pan and the lid are my 2 containers.
And how long do we usually boil it?
It's a solid day of boiling. For the amount of syrup that I try to get, which is around 40 gallons, depending on how ambitious we are and how well the trees are doing that year. It takes me a full day of tending these things and just adding sap to the boil as water evaporates off. And we're just reducing it so that we can get a liquid that has a much higher sugar content.
And a little thicker. And then, so this year you said you used propane, but here's you were telling me that you're going to do something similar to this year with the wood fire, right?
Yeah, so this was the first year that I did it, and I essentially made like a firebox, basically like a little furnace that I could just pack with wood, and it burned really hot and it worked really well. The taste wasn't actually bad, but it had a smoky flavor because I didn't have it set up so that smoke was coming out a chimney or anything like that. It was just an open fire, and it worked really well for the boil, but I got a little bit of a smoky flavor.
I don't think that was bad. It had
Yeah.
kind of a nice taste.
Yeah, I kind of like the smoky.
And so,
You know that's homemade when
Yeah.
you get it.
and so in subsequent years, we used propane, and that makes for expensive syrup
Yes.
because you use a lot of propane. So this year, a friend of mine and I are going to construct a similar,
Who?
Uncle Nate, we're gonna build another one of these, but it'll be a little bit more high tech. It'll be a little bit fancier.
And when are we planning on starting syrup collecting this year?
Well, it's the beginning of February now, and we're just gonna start paying attention to the night temperature and the day temperature, because it could be mid-February depending on how our winter goes, or it could be late February.
Yeah, I know. I see some of the buds in the trees around here have already started to get a little bit bigger than they were.
Yeah.
And that's also like a sign, I think, that the sap is coming into the tree.
Yeah.
So the thing about the maple syrup is it takes so much effort and work that it is, you really understand why, I'm going to take this off, why I think that it's so expensive, because whether people are using wood or whether they're using propane, it's still a lot of work to get this, to collect the sap, and a lot of work to boil it down. And I've heard people that only did it 1 year. You guys are troopers. You're getting ready to do your 3rd year, I think, right? Or 4th year?
I think this might be the 4th year.
Well, I think 1 year we skipped doing it because we just missed the time in.
Yeah, last year there was a bit
Yeah.
too much going on. So we didn't tap any trees, but I think we've made syrup 4 times now. I
Wow.
think
Started when I was
That's
around 7.
maybe earlier than that. Can't remember.
So I like to use maple syrup sometimes when I'm doing healing teas and stuff, because what I learned from Dr. Liu, who was the Chinese medicine, he's the practitioner who I learned from. And that is that every food has an essence. And depending on how long it lives, it's like as you're older, you get wiser. So the fact that it only comes from trees that are at least 40 years old, you know, that tells you something. It has all those, it has to take all those years to collect, you know, to get that level of energy. And
Mhm.
also, it, you know, so when you think about sugar, sugar is really a grass, and it grows, it's only a single season, you know,
Mm.
and it is also very labor intensive. And it takes actually 16 feet of sugar cane to make 1 teaspoon of sugar. So it's not unlike, you know, the 40 gallons that boil down to 1 gallon.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, so that the labor of the people that go into it is also important. And so your maple syrup is probably the sweetest maple syrup I've ever had, because I know you and how much work it went into you. And so I got last summer, you gifted me with a little bottle, and I save it for very special occasions.
I like to use it for cooking. Well, I like to use it whenever I can. But I like to use it when I'm cooking, when I'm making a spicy dish,
Mm.
and then I add a dash of maple syrup at the end, and
Ooh.
it adds that sweetness that kind of takes the edge off the heat.
Spice, yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. I'll have to try that now. So I think I'm gonna open it up to questions now, and I think we've got I can maybe put it on gallery view so we can see everybody. I can figure that out. There we go. All
I have a
right.
que-
Okay,
have a
Roberta's
question.
got her hand waving.
I have my cat waving too. Here he is, Buzzy. How would the flavor be affected if you burned maple wood to heat up and make the boil?
That's an interesting question, because every wood that you burn has a different smoky smell to it. I mean, it's different.
So it might give off a different flavor.
Yeah.
kinda like the smoke.
So if I were doing it over an open fire, like I did the first time, and I was getting some of that smoke imparted, then I could definitely try different woods to affect it. You know, the same way that you know, when you build a smoker and you smoke meat or
Yeah.
other things, you can use different woods to impart different flavor.
But it's probably not kosher because you'd be eating the mother and the baby.
It'd be weird. It'd be weird.
I'm just kidding. It
I'm
just
sure-
struck me as a
My firewood is always quite mixed, so some of it is definitely maple that
Not
goes
all
in.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Winterflower's got a question too. Winterflower, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes. Okay, gotcha. Let me just get my hand down because, yeah, I noticed that you were saying that you drill a hole into the tree to get the maple syrup out. Now, it's a living creature in a sense. You're drilling a hole into it to get the sap. My question is, do you continue to use that tree year after year to get the sap, or do you rotate it, and does it damage the tree after a while?
Well, yeah, you're drilling a hole into a living tree, but I don't necessarily use the same trees every year. And if it's a smaller tree, then I definitely don't. But also, if you go back and you tap a tree that you've tapped in the past, you have to move your tap location a good amount so that you're not essentially scarring the tree in the same place. And you'd also, it wouldn't be great for the tree, but you'd also not be able to get the sap to flow from that area as well.
Does it like form a scar tissue where the hole is?
Kind of. So trees, when they get injured, the bark start, and if you've ever seen a tree that has got hit with something or a branch is broken off and a good amount of time has passed, you'll see the bark kind of coming in over, like a good example is when you see where a branch has been cut off or pruned from a tree and a few years have passed, you can see kind of the bark rolling over that area.
Or one year I had a tree house for a few years, and we had ropes for the tree house, so you could see after a few years it just the rope was kind of tight on the tree, so it grew around the rope.
Mhm.
Remember that?
Yes. Yeah. So the same thing happens with a hole you drill, and because the hole is only 3/8 of an inch in diameter, it closes up pretty quickly.
Do you do anything to, like put a Band-Aid on it, or, like a piece of wood or something?
It's funny, and I need to find out more about this, but I decided when I started doing this that I ought to close the hole so that the tree wasn't open for infection, kind of the same way when we have a cut in our skin, we're open to infection. And so I have been finding a stick in the vicinity and whittling it and corking the hole essentially.
That's
And
nice.
I haven't read of anyone else doing that, so I don't know. I'd have to ask a biologist,
You could
or
ask-
not a biologist, but a
Botanist.
botanist
Arborist.
or an arborist, if that is worth doing or if it's good or more harmful. But that's what I've been doing.
I know that we come from a family who talks to trees and plants. I don't know if you do, but I know I do, and I'm pretty sure your dad did, and Lucy's grandpa. So do you ask the tree to permission and say thank you afterwards, or do anything like that?
I guess I don't do anything that formal.
But we should.
Mhm.
We should, but I do.
Lucy will take care of that from now
Yeah.
on.
I like to lay my hands on the tree and kind of I guess talk to it. I guess
Without words.
yeah. And like you come back and there's been a really good flow and you're getting a lot of sap and like, wow, thank you so much.
And sometimes what's fun is you can, sometimes I get to taste a little bit of the raw sap, and it's still very sweet even though we haven't boiled it down yet.
Yeah, it's like a sweet water.
There's a really wonderful book by I can't remember her name. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass, and I think I talked to you, Gil, about it, and
Yeah.
I mentioned it in my book as well as a reference. And she is, I think, Mohawk lineage, and she is also a botanist, a PhD botanist, and she has Robin Wall Kimmerer. There she is. Okay, and it's called Braiding Sweetgrass. And thank you, Kay. And she talks about that the sap comes just at the time of year when the food runs out, And so it's like a gift to the people from the gods, from nature, to give them something that they can make it through until there gets to be more food. But she, anyhow, that I think is a nice story too. And she talks about that and how important the sap is.
Yeah.
And Jill's got a question also.
So Gil and Lucy, this sounds really fascinating. I've never done it myself, but to get only 1 gallon, you have to get, like you said, 40 gallons of that. That's
Yeah.
a lot. So you can't really sell it. You just use it for yourself, right? You only
Yes.
need one.
And when so when people are producing syrup to sell, they have a lot of trees tapped, and then
Right.
their setup for boiling the syrup down is much more advanced. In fact, like these days, big producers have reverse osmosis systems to remove water that way because it's an efficient way. And then so they do a combination of that and boiling in these huge boiling containers. And it's all very controlled, and they use a hydrometer to test the syrup as they're boiling, so they know where they're at and when it needs to go to the next step.
Wow. So how long does it take you to get 40 gallons? It's a long time, right? I mean, it sounds like it takes.
Well, I mean, it'll vary by how well the sap is running, and also by how many trees I tap, how ambitious I am. Because the more trees I tap, the more sap I will gather.
I remember it lasting maybe a few weeks.
Yeah, a couple weeks. And then it has been typical for us. And then the season kind of ends. The sap stops flowing, and the trees start converting their sugars back to starches and storing it. And then it's like over like a switch.
Wow. So that's pretty interesting. I think that people make teas and stuff sometimes that are sweet from birch bark, that inside bark, because I guess that's where the sugars and starches are. But there's nothing as wonderful as maple syrup, I think.
I agree.
And it's a real tonic for springtime.
Yes. I like to do a turmeric and ginger tea, and instead of using honey, I like to use maple syrup.
Oh yeah, that sounds good.
Because it's much nicer.
Also,
Yeah.
it's fun when you're having your syrup, you can think that you made it. Like
When you're putting it on your
yeah.
pancakes.
And then you
Yeah.
realize that it wasn't just something you bought at the stores.
Mm-hmm.
It's as a specialness all to itself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I have a friend who
some-
does some maple syrup too, so
Oh,
we
yeah.
sometimes have some of her syrup.
Yeah.
Who's
have
that?
Some friends that we have whose daughter is in class with Lucy, and they have quite an operation, not a big full commercial operation. They do it on the side, but they have a little sugaring house that
Wow.
has a boiling tray and a stove that's made for the purpose, and they grade their syrup. Do they sell their syrup?
I don't know, but they give it to people.
They definitely give it to people, which is nice. But and then the other thing is, if you're selling your syrup, it has to be graded according to I guess it's according to color, which would also relate to how thick it is and how sugary it is, because the thicker it is, the darker it is.
Mm.
And I don't know how that grading system works, but I just keep ladling out some syrup from my boil and letting it cool a little, and then pouring it, and just see how it comes off the ladle. And I've mostly gotten it right, I think, when I've gone, okay, it's done.
You kind of want it to be at the thickness where it's the kind of thick, but not like super thick.
Yeah,
It's hard to explain.
It's just right.
just right.
Marcia's got her hand up, I think.
So,
I think
yeah,
you're muted.
this
Oh.
this has been real interesting, and I have tasted your maple syrup, and I just love the idea of just knowing that you guys made it. It makes it such a special thing, and it happens to be very tasty. You know, the stuff you get in the bottle sometimes, it's sweet, it's just sugary, but kudos to you guys. I just love hearing about how you make it.
And I think Roberta's got her hand up too.
I do. 2 years ago, I saw a wonderful documentary on Netflix called The Maple Syrup Heist. Very interesting documentary about Canadian maple syrup. It's such a commodity in Canada. It's so valuable that there was a huge robbery done that captivated the country for years. And it's part of the Dirty Money series. It's just amazing thing to watch. So it's the Maple Syrup Heist documentary. You definitely see it. You'll really enjoy it. I also wanted to ask you, can you have more than one tap in a tree? Could you have one on either side, up and down, sideways?
Good question. So, I think you could tap a smaller tree, but you want your tree to be at least 10 inches in diameter. And I think that's so that A, it will produce enough sap to make it worthwhile, but also B, it's robust enough so that you're not gonna damage the tree. But they recommend that you don't put 2 taps in a tree unless it's at least 20 inches in diameter.
Because you may not get as much.
Well, and you
So-
don't want to overtax
Yeah.
the tree, because the sugars are also the tree has its sugars for a reason. It's for feeding the tree. So you don't want to
Take all that.
take more than your share.
You don't want to be greedy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. All right. And I think Harold and Kay have their hand up too.
Yeah, I was wondering at the end of boil, do you, at the end of the boil, do you have leftover sap?
Like when you make a cake and you have cake left over in the
I'll
bowl.
just tell you, I have gotten leftover boil that I know people who sugar, and I use that. It's somewhat sweet, it has some sugar in it, but it's watery. And it has a lot of minerals in it. and I
Harold,
think
you're
that-
kind of cutting
Yeah,
in and out.
Harold, we need to, can you run your volume up a little?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Should I get closer?
I
Can you
can,
hear me better now? Or-
little bit. I'm gonna pull my volume up. I don't know, maybe that will help. Try now.
I didn't go into my sound settings, so sorry.
Oh,
about
okay.
that. Can you still hear me?
Now we can hear you better.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the mic is probably over here next to the thing. in the past, I've gotten people's end of the boil. It's watery, it's sap, but it's boiled down, maybe doubled or tripled, and I use it to brew beer.
Oh,
Yeah.
A lot of Vermonters do that with their sap, yeah. At the end of the boil, what's left that they can't boil down, or they just have leftover in
Oh,
their tank.
oh, I don't have leftover, just due to how I collect it. Because I collected in milk jugs, I can just use it all. And, yeah,
And
a
you have
guy
a
I
smaller
work with-
tank.
What's that?
You have a smaller tank.
Yes. Or no tank at all.
yeah.
I just have my milk jugs and, oh yeah. Lucy is showing
That's it.
Uh-huh.
that's a vinegar bottle with the bottom cut off because it's actually a funnel. It's clearly a funnel.
Oh yeah.
But there's tons of uses for it. A guy I worked with has done this, and he thought he could sell it, but hasn't done that. But just taking the sap and carbonating it. Just taking the sap unboiled, at the low sugar content and pretty much the consistency of water, and just carbonating that as a maple product. And that sounds pretty tasty.
Yeah, carbonated. I think I saw that somewhere and tried it, and it was quite good.
In the lighthouse.
In the lighthouse, yeah, the lighthouse in Manchester has it in their,
Oh, cool.
in their refrigerator. It was very good.
We'll have to try that. And you always have to sip some sap when you're in the kitchen. You have to
Yes,
yeah.
I bet. Yeah. I liked when I have enough maple syrup around, I like to do, like I call them maple syrup shots. So it's just like a little, just like, it's like, woo, it's just, like, it's
Yeah.
not diluted by pancakes or waffles or anything. It's just like straight up. There you go. It's like, woo,
Mhm.
very nice. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
So, and I know, when I have a bottle, I usually rinse it out at the end and drink that too. These are the secret things I do in the kitchen
Oh yeah.
because I don't share this stuff,
I do all those things.
Yes, it's really delicious stuff. And once you find out how people make it, you realize why it's so expensive in the store, because it's so labor intensive. It's so special, and such a gift from the trees. Yeah, Jill, you've got your hand up.
So do you guys have different recipes for things like maple cookies and maple ice cream and maple this and maple that? Anything fun?
Not really any recipes that we stuck with, but I use it in cooking quite a bit.
Like
Anything
sometimes-
that might require a little bit of sweetness. I have one of those squeeze bottles, kind of like a ketchup bottle,
Oh,
that's in
yeah.
the fridge, and I always have syrup in it,
Oh,
and I
that's
can
great.
use it for
So that-
dispense it.
Sometimes you can add in beans and rice.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Rice.
And also sometimes it's nice to put a little in some water, and that makes the water a little sweet.
Oh yeah, you can put a little shot in water and to adjust the sweetness of your water.
Mm. That's a nice treat too. I wonder, we have one of those little seltzer, like you can make carbonated drinks. Maybe I'll
Oh.
try that with some maple
That would
syrup
be delicious.
in water, and we'll try that out. See if we can make our own maple soda.
Maple
Yeah.
seltzer.
Well,
Yeah, maple
the other
seltzer.
thing that you have to do if you're making syrup, or if you're not making syrup and you just have syrup, is when there's a fresh snow, you go out with a bowl and you just scoop up some snow in your bowl, and then
Ugh.
Or just do it straight on the snow and then get a spoon
you could do
and
that
eat it.
too.
That's what I like to do.
Save a dish.
Yeah.
Hey, kitty.
Oh, there's the kitty.
That's Buzzy. So are there any other questions or anything?
Yeah, you guys are making me hungry.
Yeah, Nancy's got her hand up.
Yeah, Chip makes this amazing soup with all kinds of root vegetables,
Oh.
butternut squash and apples and rutabagas, and puts a little
Oh.
syrup in that. It's a recipe from a really fancy restaurant
Ah.
in Virginia. So you
That
put
sounds
Sounds
really good.
just a little tiny speck of something like that. I put it on my cereal every day, my oatmeal.
It's
Yeah.
really
That's
good. A
more.
little goes a long way. It's very good.
Yeah.
And I think it has a real essence to it that's very healing, especially this time of year, because it has that wood energy from the spring, which is always an upward, uplifting kind of energy.
Yeah, it's kind of, I like it because I feel like when it's time to go out and tap trees, you're turning that corner
Yes.
between winter and spring,
Yeah.
and it's kind of the sign.
Yeah.
Nice ritual.
It's a
Well,
nice,
when I
yeah,
look out
ritual.
my window, it looks to me like winter just started.
Well, yeah, but it's
I
moving.
understand what you're saying.
Oh, there's the squeeze
Wow.
bottle.
Beautiful,
Thank you, Lucy.
Beautiful color.
Nice.
beautiful color.
Yeah.
Lucy,
This
will
is
you be
very-
sending us each a little bottle, I assume?
I think this
I don't think so.
may be very
Jill, you have to come to
precious
Maine
because
to
it
get
may
it.
be all I have left.
Yeah,
Before-
that's all you have left from the year, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty intense. I think that, there's a place in Mount Vernon called Moonlight Maple, and I think they're still in business, and that's like a local producer. But if you can find a small local producer, I mean, they're doing way more than 40 gallons
Yeah.
if they're selling it. But you can find some small local producers in Vermont, in Maine, probably even in Western Massachusetts.
Upstate New York.
Upstate New York.
Good idea. Makes me want to order some, the
Yeah.
really good stuff.
Yeah. And Harold's got his hand up again. Or Harold and Kay have their hand up.
Oh, a little bit of trivia. The difference between the United States and Canada is the United States has a strategic petroleum reserve, right? You've probably heard of this.
Right.
Canada has a strategic maple syrup reserve.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Strategic maple syrup reserve.
It's
That
it's in the
sounds much-
documentary. Yeah, they do.
That sounds much more pleasant.
I keep thinking about the heist that Roberta was describing, and I really think that they should make a movie that's kind of like The Italian Job, except
With maple syrup.
Canadian maple syrup.
The
Well,
Canadian
maybe
job.
Lucy can do it for a school project.
Yeah.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to
so-
go look for that. I'm gonna have to look for that documentary
Yeah.
now. So,
It's part of the Dirty Money series. It's a
Okay.
great series.
I'm gonna look that up.
that would be the sticky money.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can also get maple sugar from
Yes.
maple syrup.
Yeah, and the whole people didn't make a lot of syrup in the old days because their source of sugar was boiling sap down to to a granular sugar.
And also sometimes if you notice the cap of the syrup bottle, sometimes it crusts into sugar.
Yes.
And
then
it's
you can-
delicious.
You can get that out and eat that. And but that's why it's called sugaring,
Yeah. Yeah.
the process. There's a really great description of that is in the book Little House in the Big Woods.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically a how-to manual.
Little
For-
House on the Prairie also.
Do they make more syrup there?
I don't know, but like people may know it better as the series.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes. But really
Same
interesting.
author.
Yes. And she talks about who's doing what and collecting the syrup and boiling it in a cauldron and then finishing it on the wood cook stove. And the mother knew just the right time to take it off so it didn't burn and she would have granular sugar.
Wow.
But at the same time, they had refined sugar if they could get it.
Yeah.
And they felt that was better because it was fancy and pure looking. So they would save that for company.
Oh my. Yeah. Well, we don't do that. It'd be the reverse now. Well,
Yeah.
but yeah. Yeah. So, well, it was hard to get back in the day. I mean, but we all like sugar though. So,
Yeah, we sure
but
do.
there's something very special about the maple syrup and maple sugar.
Yeah.
So, if is there any more questions or anything? Come on, 8 o'clock now. So, Mark, Jill's got one.
Well, I just want to say I really appreciate hearing about your maple project and process because a lot of people like myself who are vegan and don't eat honey, maple is an excellent, excellent alternative. And assuming you're not ruining trees, which we're not even getting into tonight, but I eat a lot of maple products and don't eat honey. So I think it's fantastic. So now I've learned a lot more about it. So I just want to say thank you so much for teaching us how you do that. That's really good. Makes me want to go out and buy some more maple syrup right now.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun to talk about, and I'm no expert. We just decided we were going to do it and kind of worked our way through it the first time and hopefully remember what we did last year. And
Gets a little easier, better every time you get to do
Yes.
it. And I think Wonderflower's got another question too.
Yeah, I think this is probably going to be a very odd question. But I know you were talking about grades of color and that's the sugar content within the syrup. Now, when you see these products on the shelf that says sugar-free, are all of these processed or can you actually like take away some of the sweetness by boiling it more or boiling it less, naturally?
sure, like the less you boil, the lower the sugar content will be because the water content will be higher.
It's never sugar-free though, maple.
Yeah, I never see anything that says sugar-free and it's a big red flag.
like how Fruit Loops sometimes say made with real fruit.
Yeah, hard to say.
Yeah, I think the least sugar you would find in maple would be in the sap. If you can get like just the sap, that would have
Yeah.
the lowest sugar content, but it would
Yeah.
still be it's still pretty sweet.
Yeah,
I've drank the sap before, but
like a
it's
sweet woody water.
yeah.
Except it doesn't taste like.
It just has that.
The consistency of
Yeah.
water, but it tastes like sap. Maple
Yeah.
sap.
It has that kind of earthy flavor
Mm.
hidden in there.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming tonight, and thank you for thanks so much to Gil and Lucy who have shared this wonderful
Yay.
experience with us
Thank
and
you.
welcome us to the very, very early beginning of spring.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Great.
So,
And love to
Yay.
Margot. Okay,
Yes.
bye.
yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Okay.